British Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer says he wants to end rough sleeping for all ex-military personnel this year. It's a laudable quest, but not without controversy. Mr Mercer has been criticised for suggesting today that some veterans may be using food banks because of personal decisions and bad budgeting. I spoke to him just before we came on air. Well, I'm joined by Johnny Mercer. Johnny, thank you for joining me. So you've had a busy day.
Yes, we have.
First of all, I think the initiative you're doing is brilliant, and we're going to come to that. To rid homelessness for our veterans seems to me a root one thing for any civilised society to be doing, and I will come to that. But you've blown up on social media, you know this, because of this comment you made about food banks.
What, service personnel should not be using food banks?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely correct.
So the reaction's been quite strong. You've been trending at various stages on Twitter.
Fantastic.
I want to just play, first of all, what you said to Kay Burley on Sky this morning.
Look, these are personal decisions around, how people are budgeting every month. I don't want to see anyone using food banks. Of course I don't. But we're in an extremely difficult time around the cost of living.
People don't choose to use food banks. You're saying it's a choice whether they use them or not. It's not. They're using them because they're saying they have no other alternative.
Well, in my experience, Kay, that's not correct.
So people have taken this as you being a little blinkered, perhaps, about why people use food banks. Do you stand by what you said this morning? Did it come out the wrong way? What do you want to say about it?
Piers, people will take whatever they want to take from what you say, right? I clearly said that service personnel should not be using food banks. That is absolutely correct. That anybody on a wage like that who has subsidised food and accommodation should not be using food banks. And in my experience, that is not the case.
But it's a comment about personal choice.
Hang on a second.
Yeah, no, but that's
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's sure. That's right.
People then take that and say, I think people should generally not use food banks and they make a personal choice. That's not what I said. So there's no point debating that because that's not what I said. But what I said was service personnel, and I was very clear with that.
But you said that people make personal choices. And what the inference...
Talking about service personnel, yeah.
And people have said the inference from that is that they shouldn't be on food banks. They're making a choice to be on them. The criticism has been, actually, for most people on food banks, it's not a choice, it's a necessity to feed themselves and their family.
So I don't dispute that for the wider population, right? And I come across and I work in, I visit food banks in my constituency and I see the need for food banks in some of our most complex and our poorest communities, without a shadow of a doubt. But that's not what I was saying this morning. I was saying service personnel should not be using food banks, and they shouldn't. On their wage, with subsidised food and accommodation, they should not be using food banks. If any of them are, please do get in touch because I'll be able to help them.
But do you genuinely think anyone of military personnel is using a food bank through personal choice?
I think there is no requirement whatsoever for anyone in the military to be using a food bank.
OK. A guy called Fred Thomas, who's a former Royal Marines captain, he's standing as a Labour candidate, MP for Plymouth Moor View. He says he's shocked and appalled by the comments you made, and he says Johnny Mercer may well be able to make budget adjustments on an income of more than £150,000. But how could he not know that for so many of our people, no matter how hard they work and how well they budget, they just don't earn enough to keep up with the spiralling costs and the despair this causes?
Well, again, I mean, firstly, it's an individual who's trying to get elected, right? And everyone on the other side of the fence on this has taken this to mean that I don't think anybody should be on food banks, and that's a deliberate choice to them. Actually, what I was saying was if you're in the military, you shouldn't be on food banks. It's a very reasonable thing to say. So, people use these opportunities. There's been lots of people today using these opportunities. To be totally honest with you, Piers, I just don't get involved because I haven't got the energy for it. They're arguing about something I didn't say. They're trying to make a political point. I'm not interested. I'd launched a scheme today to end veterans' homelessness. This is where political debate is in the country, and I'm just not interested in it because it's like a false, silly little game for people to put things on Twitter. I've got bigger things to do. I've got really important things to do. I just don't have any time for this nonsense, I'm afraid.
Let's turn to Operation Fortitude. How many ex-servicemen and women are actually homeless? Do you know?
Yeah, so look, there's always been conversations about how many homeless veterans there are in this country, and it's been a difficult thing to work out because we have traditionally not had a real grip on veterans data, right? So we didn't even know how many veterans there were in this country when I started this job. For the first time last year, we got it in the census, right, where you could declare if you're a veteran. So we know roughly there's about 2.27 million veterans in this country at the moment. Of those, about 13,000 people who completed a survey who were in sheltered accommodation, about 1.8% of them were veterans, right? So there's an underrepresentation of veterans in the homeless community. And so clearly it is a manageable community that we can deal with. If we can put in wraparound services and clear care pathways for these people to get out of homelessness, we can do it. And that's what we've done with £8.5 million worth of funding from the Treasury.
What timescale have you put on this?
I don't want to see a single homeless veteran by the end of this year. And if there is, you know, I'm happy to go around and visit people and find out exactly why that is. So to be clear, that is a veteran sleeping rough because of a lack of provision. Clearly, some people will want to sleep rough. And I met a man last week who wanted to sleep in a tent because they, for a number of different reasons from their time in service, I've met plenty of people who want to go and live in the woods for a week. And, you know, if that's what they want to do, that's fine. That's not what this is about. This is about people whose lives have become incredibly difficult through addiction, through debt, through substance misuse, whatever it may be. And it's about getting them in, getting a roof over their head, providing those services and getting their life back on track.
I've got a lot of military in my family. My brother's just retired after 37 years, rose to be a colonel. This issue of homelessness with veterans, it really stings with the military because we shouldn't be having any homeless veterans in this country, should we?
Well, it's a very kind of visceral representation, isn't it, of people who've served in the military and put their lives on the line and then have fallen on hard times.
Do we care enough about them as a country?
I think, to be honest, things have fundamentally changed in the last sort of 4 to 5 years. So I came into this because veterans care was not very good, right? And I fought in Afghan 2006 onwards, and I came into this because I was fed up with how my generation of veterans were treated. Yes, it's been a fight, I'm not going to lie to you, but the British people have always kind of got it, right? They've donated millions to Help for Heroes and people like that. I think the government's been a lot slower. It's been very difficult in that space. We've now got veterans out of the MOD, right? So we have the UK's first Office of Veterans Affairs, something the Americans and the Australians and Canadians did decades ago. We have a cabinet minister who is responsible for veterans, able to pull in all different parts of government and make it work for veterans. So yes, we are fundamentally changing it, but you know, I want this to be the best country in the world to be a veteran, not because I say so, but because people actually feel that, right?
You've put a timescale on it. Your boss, Rishi Sunak, has had his own 5 pledges. And when I interviewed him at the start of the year, he said, come back at the end of the year and mark me. As things stand, the report card isn't going to be good because he possibly may not hit any of those pledges. Yeah,
I mean, hang on a second, Piers, because at the beginning of this, right, when he made those 5 pledges, people were falling over themselves to say this is going to happen anyway. Inflation is going to halve. We're going to stop the boats. Okay, these are actually incredibly difficult things to do. So inflation doesn't just fall. You need to do a series of measures to make that happen. And he is making progress on those things.
Do you think he'll hit the pledges by the...
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. You know, we're 6 months in and it's difficult, right? It is difficult. Solving migration is difficult. It's not easy. Halving inflation is difficult. And all these other things, right? We're halfway through. You know, we're super keen to knock people who are doing their best in public service, like he is, or like I am today. I think if we just take the gas off that a little bit and actually see what these people are trying to do...
If he was to fail on all 5 pledges by the end of the year, where does that leave the Prime Minister? I mean, if you set your stall and your premiership by 5 pledges...
I don't think that's going to happen, Piers, so I'm not thinking about that. I think he's going to get there. I think that we've been through an incredibly difficult time. I think the last couple of years have been pretty painful, both personally and for the country. But I think things have changed. We got a new guy in. He's clearly extremely gifted and capable. We need to rally around him. He's clearly the best individual to be Prime Minister. And we need to get into that election and win it.
He's come out batting very aggressively for the England team over Bairstow Gates, the stumping. Anthony Albanese, who's the Australian Prime Minister, has hit back, telling him to stay in his crease. So there's now a major diplomatic row. Clearly, the English all believe that we were done in here. The Australians all believe that this was whining pommies who should shut up. Where do you sit with this story?
Look, I think he was, by the rules of the game, obviously this guy was out, right? But, I mean, these Australians, they were caught like sandpapering the ball, 3 years ago? And then they all cried when they got caught and went home and all the rest of it. It's pretty embarrassing. You're not going to get any sort of, you know, spirit of sportsmanship out of that. You've just got to get to the next game and give them a good pacing, and that's the way to get through it.
Fine words, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.